There exists a pain that finds no name in any dictionary, a weight that settles in the chest like a cold stone that grows with each morning. It is the moment when you wake up and the first sensation is not gratitude for the new day, but a deep sigh from someone who carries the world on their shoulders. You look at the ceiling, and for some endless seconds, the only question that echoes in your mind is why you need to get up again. It is not laziness, it is not lack of apparent purpose, it is something much deeper and more frightening. It is when existence itself becomes a burden too heavy to carry alone. You may be surrounded by people, have a life that in the eyes of others seems complete, but inside there is a void that screams in silence, an echo that no one can hear. It is as if your soul were crying for help in a language that the world has not yet learned to decipher. Franz Kafka intimately knew this language of silent suffering, this invisible prison where we live when the weariness of living becomes more real than life itself. Today, I want to share with you a discovery that can illuminate this tunnel that seems to have no exit. If you have made it this far, perhaps it is because you also know this pain that has no name. This weariness that goes beyond the physical. I want you to know that you are not alone on this journey, and this channel exists precisely for people like you, who seek to understand the deepest mysteries of the human soul. Here, we explore the uncharted territories of the heart. We offer words for feelings that seemed impossible to express, and most importantly, we build a community where your pain is seen, understood, and embraced. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell, because each video is carefully created for those who feel deeply, for those who question, for those who seek answers in places where few dare to look. And if this content touches your heart in any way, leave your like, because this helps me continue creating this safe space where we can explore together the most intimate mysteries of human experience. Kafka once wrote about a man who woke up transformed into a giant insect, but perhaps the cruelest metamorphosis is the one that happens imperceptibly, day after day, when life gradually empties itself of meaning and color. Imagine a person who one day was connected to their dreams, their passions, their relationships, and suddenly, without knowing exactly when or how, finds themselves living like an automaton, fulfilling routines that have lost all meaning. It is as if they had become a prisoner of an existence they did not choose, but accept because they see no alternative. The weariness of living does not arise from nothing. It is the result of a long journey of disconnection from our own essence. We begin to live to please others, to follow paths that are not ours, to silence the inner voice that cries out for authenticity. Society teaches us that we must be productive, efficient, always happy, always in motion, but rarely asks us if we are truly alive inside. The human soul is like an underground spring of crystal water that needs to flow to sustain life. When this spring is blocked by layers of social expectations, unresolved traumas, toxic relationships, or simply by the rush of daily life, the water stops flowing and we begin to wither inside. What we call depression, anxiety, or existential weariness are actually symptoms of a thirsty soul, of a being that has lost contact with its inner source of vitality. Kafka masterfully captured this sensation of being biologically alive but spiritually dead. His characters live in a world where the rules are incomprehensible, where social systems oppress them without them understanding why, where genuine communication becomes impossible. This is exactly how a person in deep existential weariness feels, as if trying to navigate through a labyrinth without a map, where each door they open leads to another equally confusing corridor. The soul's cry for help is rarely explicit. It does not scream, it does not make a scene, it does not break objects. On the contrary, it whispers through symptoms that society quickly tries to silence. The insomnia that keeps us awake in the early hours is not just a sleep disorder. It is the soul asking for time and space to process the life we are living. Chronic lack of energy is not just physical fatigue, it is the body saying that we are spending our vital force on things that do not nourish our essence. Constant irritability is not just bad mood, it is the soul protesting against a reality that does not match our deep nature. But we live in a society that prefers to medicate symptoms rather than understand messages, that prefers to accelerate the process rather than allow the soul to have its time of healing and rebirth. And have you ever felt this inexplicable weight, this sensation of living someone else's life while your true existence remains stored somewhere inaccessible in your heart? If you are going through this moment now, please leave in the comments, "My soul needs time to be reborn." Your courage in recognizing this may be exactly the permission that another person needs to also honor their own journey of transformation and healing. When Kafka described the metamorphosis of Gregor Samsa, he was not just telling the story of a man who becomes an insect, he was revealing something much deeper about the modern human condition. We all go through constant metamorphoses, but we often transform into versions of ourselves that we do not recognize, that we have not consciously chosen. We transform into the child our parents wanted us to be, the employee the company needs, the spouse the partner expects, the person society approves of. And in the midst of so many external transformations, we lose contact with our natural metamorphosis, the one that would lead us to become who we truly are in essence. The weariness of living arises when there is too great a dissonance between who we are inside and who we are being on the outside. It is as if we were forcing an oak seed to grow as a pine tree. No matter how hard we try, no matter how much we attempt to adapt, there is something in the deep nature of our being that rebels against this falsification of identity. The soul knows when we are living a borrowed life, when we are playing a role that does not belong to us, when we are betraying our own essence in the name of security or social acceptance. The tragedy of the modern condition is that we have learned to interpret this existential weariness as personal failure, as weakness, as something that needs to be quickly corrected or overcome. We were not taught that this weariness may actually be a sign of wisdom from the soul, a call to reevaluate our trajectory, to question whether the path we are following truly leads us somewhere worth reaching. The weariness of living is not necessarily a disease to be cured. It may be an awakening, disguised as a symptom, an invitation to a more authentic life aligned with our true nature. Imagine a tree growing in a pot that is too small. For a while it manages to develop, but there comes a moment when its roots begin to become tangled, without space to expand. The tree does not die immediately, but it stops growing, its leaves lose their shine, its branches become fragile. It is technically alive, but it is not flourishing. This is what happens to us when we live in mental, emotional, and social structures that have become too small to contain our natural evolution. The weariness of living is the sign that we need a larger pot, more fertile soil, more space to expand toward the light. Kafka had an acute sensitivity to perceive these invisible prisons that we build or that society builds around us. His characters frequently find themselves trapped in endless bureaucracies, in processes they do not understand, in relationships they can neither sustain nor abandon. It is a perfect metaphor for how many of us live, trapped in structures we did not consciously choose, following rules we do not question, pursuing goals that do not truly belong to us. And when the soul grows weary of this prison, when it stops fighting and simply accepts resignation, that is when what we call existential weariness arises. But there is a fundamental difference between resignation and surrender. Resignation is passive. It is giving up because we believe there is no alternative. Surrender is active. It is allowing something greater within us to take the reins when we recognize that our conscious strategy is not working. When a person in deep existential weariness learns the difference between these two postures, something magical can happen. Instead of fighting against the weariness or trying to force enthusiasm they do not feel, they can surrender to the wisdom of this weariness. They can ask themselves, what is this fatigue trying to teach me? What needs to die in my life so that something new can be born? The journey through existential weariness is neither linear nor predictable. It is like walking through a dense forest where familiar trails have disappeared, and we need to trust our inner compass to find the way. There are days when the darkness seems absolute, when each step requires immense effort, when the temptation to simply stop and sit down is almost irresistible. But there are also moments of surprising clarity, insights that arise from nowhere, small signs that we are on the right path even when we cannot see the destination. What makes this journey even more challenging is that we live in a culture that is in a hurry for everything, that wants immediate results, that interprets any slowness as failure. But the soul operates on a different time than chronological time. It needs cycles, seasons, periods of dormancy followed by periods of flowering. When a person is going through the winter of the soul, there is no point in forcing spring. It is necessary to honor this time of withdrawal, of introspection, of silent gestation of something new that does not yet have a defined form. Kafka deeply understood this cyclical aspect of human experience. His texts frequently portray characters in transition, in metamorphosis, in intermediate states between what they were and what they will become. There is no rush in these transformations. There are no magic formulas or quick solutions. There is only the raw and honest experience of being transformed by forces that are greater than our conscious understanding. And perhaps this is exactly what our era needs to learn, that not all pain needs to be immediately relieved, that not all discomfort needs to be quickly resolved, that some growth processes require us to traverse uncomfortable territories to reach more authentic versions of ourselves. The isolation that frequently accompanies existential weariness also carries hidden wisdom. When we withdraw from the world for a time, when we lose interest in habitual social activities, when we prefer solitude to companionship, we are not necessarily isolating ourselves in a pathological way. Sometimes we are instinctively creating the necessary space for a profound transformation to happen. It is like an animal seeking a cave to hibernate. It is not escape from life. It is preparation for a new spring. But it is important to distinguish between conscious and temporary isolation that serves growth and isolation as permanent escape from reality. The first is like the butterfly's cocoon, a protected space where a necessary metamorphosis can happen. The second is like a self-imposed prison that prevents any possibility of transformation. The difference lies in intention and consciousness. When we isolate ourselves consciously, we know it is temporary, that we are withdrawing to regroup ourselves, to process experiences, to connect with our internal resources. When we isolate ourselves out of fear or hopelessness, we are fleeing from life instead of preparing to live it more fully. There is a solitude that is empty and a solitude that is full. Empty solitude is that in which we feel disconnected from ourselves and others, in which silence is oppressive and quietude is distressing. Full solitude is that in which we are in the company of our own essence, in which silence is nourishing and quietude is restorative. Learning to cultivate this fertile solitude is one of the most important skills for those navigating through existential weariness. It is in this space of conscious quietude that we can hear the subtle messages of the soul, that we can reconnect with our deepest values, that we can rediscover what truly matters to us. The process of healing from existential weariness rarely involves dramatic external changes, although they may happen naturally. Most of the time it involves very subtle changes in how we relate to ourselves and to life. It is like adjusting the focus of a camera. The scenery remains the same, but our perception becomes clearer and more defined. We begin to notice details that previously went unnoticed. We begin to appreciate nuances we previously ignored. We begin to find beauty in places where we once saw only monotony. One of the most significant transformations happens when we stop resisting what we are feeling and begin to be curious about it. Instead of judging our weariness as something wrong that needs to be corrected, we begin to investigate it as if it were an important message we need to decode. Instead of trying to force energy we do not have, we begin to honor our natural rhythms and find gentle ways to move through difficult days. Instead of comparing ourselves with previous versions of ourselves or with other people who seem more vibrant, we begin to accept that we are in a unique moment of our journey that has its own value and wisdom. Kafka had a phrase that said, "A book should be the axe for the frozen sea within us." Existential weariness can function in a similar way. It can be the axe that breaks the layers of ice that formed around our heart, that disconnected us from our passion for life, from our natural curiosity, from our capacity to marvel at existence. When we allow this axe to do its work, when we do not try to stop it or divert it, it can take us to deeper and clearer waters of our own nature. The rebirth that can emerge from this journey through darkness frequently surprises with its subtlety and naturalness. It is not like waking up one day completely transformed, but like a gradual dawn in which the light intensifies almost imperceptibly until suddenly we realize it is day. Energy returns, not as an explosion, but as a river that flows again after the stones that blocked it have been removed. Interest in life returns not as euphoria, but as a gentle and sustainable curiosity. Relationships become more authentic, not because we changed drastically, but because we stopped pretending to be who we are not. Perhaps the greatest gift that existential weariness can offer us is a deeper compassion for our own humanity and for the humanity of others. When we traverse our own periods of darkness, we develop a special sensitivity to recognize when someone is going through similar moments. We do not try to fix them or offer quick solutions, but we manage to offer something much more precious: the genuine presence of someone who intimately knows the territory through which they are navigating. And so, what initially seemed to be a problem to be solved reveals itself as an initiation to be lived, a necessary passage in our evolution as conscious human beings. The weariness of living, when embraced with courage and wisdom, can transform into the beginning of a truer life, more aligned with our essence, more connected to what truly matters. The soul that asked for help through this weariness was not asking to be rescued from its condition. It was asking to be heard, understood, and honored in its journey of transformation. And when we finally respond to this call, when we offer our own soul the time, space, and compassion it needs, we discover that the soul's cry for help can become the first step of a new life.